The execution plaza of the Galactic Empire's capital world was a cold, sterile expanse of black steel and hovering surveillance drones. It was designed to break spirits, to remind every being in the Empire that defiance had only one end. Today, the spectacle was not just another nameless dissident or petty smuggler. Today, the execution was personal. Dr. Elias Carter stood at the center of the platform, bound in restraints that hummed with energy, suppressing even the possibility of movement. His face, though bruised from interrogation, held no fear. He did not beg. He did not curse. He only stared into the crowd with a quiet resolve that unsettled even the most hardened enforcers. The voice of the imperial adjudicator, amplified through towering speakers, echoed across the assembly. Elias Carter, you are guilty of treason against the Galactic Empire. You are sentenced to immediate execution. Do you have any final words? Silence. The audience, an orchestrated blend of loyalists, officials, and citizens conditioned to obedience, waited. Then Elias smiled. Not a desperate smile, nor one of madness, but something else entirely. Something that made even the adjudicator hesitate. You should have left me in a cell, he said, his voice carrying farther than it should have, steady and calm. Because now, you've ensured she will come for you. A murmur rippled through the crowd, but the adjudicator simply sneered. And who is this she? Elias chuckled softly. You'll know soon enough. The energy lance fired, a searing bolt of light piercing his chest. His body stiffened, his breath caught for a fraction of a second, and then he crumpled, motionless. The execution was over, but the war had just begun. Light years away, aboard a shadowed command center deep within the fringes of the galaxy, a message arrived. General Cassandra Carter stood motionless as she read it. The words were simple, official, cold. Elias Carter, executed for treason. A lesser woman might have collapsed, might have wept, cursed, broken under the weight of loss. But Cassandra was not lesser. She was forged in war, shaped by fire and blood long before she met Elias. He had been her calm, her anchor, the one who reminded her she was more than just a weapon. And now he was gone. The officer beside her, a hardened man who had followed her through countless battles, hesitated before speaking. General, what are your orders? She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she exhaled, slow and steady. Every fiber of her being screamed for blood, for vengeance. But vengeance alone was weak. Vengeance burned hot and faded fast. She needed something more. A storm, not a spark. Cassandra turned, eyes colder than the void beyond the viewport. Summon the War Council. Now, the officer swallowed hard and rushed to obey. The crew of the command station knew better than to question her tone. They had seen her in battle. They had seen what she did to those who stood in her way. When she stepped into the war room, the gathered commanders straightened in their seats. Holographic displays flickered to life, tactical maps and fleet positions hovering in the air. They were veterans, rebels, soldiers who had spent years fighting against the Empire's chokehold on humanity. But even they could sense something different in her presence tonight. 3 hours ago, she said, her voice like steel, the Empire executed Elias Carter. My husband. Silence. No one dared speak. You all knew him, she continued. You knew his mind, his brilliance. He built the technologies that gave us an edge in this war. And they killed him, publicly, as a warning. Her fingers flexed at her sides, not in hesitation, but in restraint. The Empire believes this will break us, that it will deter resistance. A humorless smile ghosted across her lips. They think I will grieve, lick my wounds, and disappear. She took a slow step forward, voice low but carrying enough force to silence even the hum of the hollow displays. They do not understand what they have done. A ripple of unease passed through the room. Not fear, anticipation. They have mistaken my love for weakness, Cassandra continued, each word sharp as a blade. They believe they have ended my reason to fight. Her eyes flickered across her commanders. Some looked furious, others grim. All were waiting. They are wrong. She turned to the display, inputting commands. The holograms shifted, tactical overlays forming. supply lines, fleet deployments, weak points. We move immediately, she said. No grand speeches, no warnings. They will not see us coming. One of the younger officers hesitated. General, if we do this, there is no going back. We'll be declaring total war. Cassandra met his gaze. They declared it first. The room was still for only a moment longer. Then the murmurs of agreement, the silent nods, the flickering of battle plans. Orders relayed. Ships mobilized. The Empire thought they had won. They had merely started a war they could never hope to survive. The first strike was surgical. A remote Imperial outpost along the perimeter line, considered too minor to warrant heavy defenses, became a silent graveyard within minutes. The attack had been swift, methodical. Cassandra's forces jammed communications, disabled energy shielding, and eliminated every soldier with precision that bordered on merciless. There were no survivors, no witnesses left to warn the Empire of what was coming. Cassandra watched from the bridge of her flagship as the remains of the outpost drifted through space, scorched and lifeless. She felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not sorrow. Only the cold certainty that this was just the beginning. Her second-in-command, Captain Darius Rowe, studied the readouts from the battle. A seasoned soldier, he had fought under Cassandra for years and had seen firsthand what she was capable of. But there was something different now. Something unrelenting in the way she moved, the way she commanded. They'll notice soon, Darius said. Patrols are due to check in within the next cycle. Cassandra's gaze didn't waver from the viewport. Let them. He hesitated. We've never hit Imperial assets this aggressively before. We've always struck from the shadows, kept our movements limited. That was before. Darius had no response to that. He had known Elias too, had respected the man, but he had also known what Cassandra was beneath the surface. She had been tempered by war long before her husband's death. He had simply been the tether, keeping her from unleashing the full extent of her wrath. The Empire had severed that tether. Reports filtered in from their informants. The Empire was beginning to notice the disappearances. Supply convoys had gone silent. Orbital stations along key hyperspace lanes had been raided, their data cores wiped, their security teams left in pieces. The attacks were too precise to be random. Someone was moving against them. But the Empire, arrogant in its power, still believed it was dealing with scattered insurgents. That illusion. The Imperial High Command finally took action when Cassandra struck the weapons foundry on Vargos Prime. It was one of the Empire's key production hubs, a facility that churned out warships and advanced armaments for the fleet. They never expected anyone to breach its defenses, much less obliterate it entirely. She led the attack herself. The battle was over in less than an hour. The orbital defenses crumbled first, precision strikes crippling their response time. By the time the ground forces realized they were under siege, it was too late. Cassandra's troops swept through the complex, overriding security locks, planting explosives at critical points. They moved like wraiths, ruthless and efficient. The detonation came as Cassandra stood at the edge of the landing bay, watching the last of her forces withdraw. The shockwave rippled through the station, flames consuming the sprawling complex below. She felt the heat even from this distance, but she didn't turn away. Darius approached, wiping soot from his face. We have to go. Imperial reinforcements are en route. Cassandra lingered for just a moment longer before turning back to the transport. As they lifted off, escaping into the void, she spoke with quiet certainty. This is only the beginning. The Empire was now fully aware that something was wrong. The destruction of Vargos Prime was too coordinated, too devastating to be the work of simple rebels. The attacks bore the mark of a strategist, of someone who knew their weaknesses and had no intention of stopping. The name Cassandra Carter began to spread in hushed voices, whispered between officers, mentioned in cautious reports to high-ranking officials. Some in the Empire knew of her from past skirmishes, but many dismissed her as nothing more than a skilled rebel commander. That mistake would cost them. Admiral Varix, a man renowned for his ruthless efficiency, was summoned to lead the hunt. He stood before the Emperor himself, the great ruler cloaked in opulence, his voice calm, but carrying the weight of unspoken threat. Eliminate her. Varix bowed. She is human. She bleeds. She will fall. The Emperor's expression did not change. Then do not fail. Varix launched his campaign with overwhelming force, dispatching entire fleets to crush the insurgency. He underestimated her. Cassandra knew the Empire would retaliate. She had spent years studying their tactics, their patterns of response. They would expect her to dig in, to hold her ground, and fight conventionally. She did the opposite. She scattered her forces, striking multiple targets at once, stretching Imperial defenses thin. Communication relays were sabotaged, vital supply routes collapsed, high-ranking officers assassinated in their own quarters. No single attack was large enough to cripple the Empire, but the pattern was clear. Their grip on the galaxy was beginning to loosen. Varix's frustration grew. He tightened security, increased patrols, executed suspected sympathizers. It only fueled the resistance. Other factions, long hesitant to openly defy the Empire, began to take notice. Some offered assistance in secret. Others began their own uprisings. Cassandra continued to press forward. Her forces struck an Imperial data center, uncovering classified information buried deep within encrypted archives. What they found was worse than she imagined. The Empire was preparing a weapon, a superweapon capable of annihilating entire planets in minutes. Not for war, not for conquest, but for control, a means to keep humanity and every other species under absolute submission. Elias had suspected something like this before he was captured. He had died before he could prove it. Cassandra had proof now. She stared at the data, her grip tightening. Darius read the files over her shoulder, his face dark. If they complete this, they won't, she said. He nodded. Then we go for the heart. The time for tactical strikes and calculated sabotage was over. The Empire had ensured that this war would be personal. Now, Cassandra would return the favor. The Imperial fleet lay in wait above the desolate world of Tyrus IX, their formation a wall of fire and steel. Admiral Varix stood on the bridge of his dreadnought, hands clasped behind his back, eyes scanning the endless void. Reports had flooded in. Cassandra Carter's forces were approaching. The woman had eluded him for too long, leaving a trail of ruin in her wake. That ended today. Sensors flared. The Resistance fleet emerged from hyperspace, not in a scattered formation, not as desperate rebels grasping at hope, but as an armada, precise and unyielding. Cassandra had abandoned guerrilla tactics. This was a declaration of annihilation. Varix smirked. She's come to die. The first volley ignited space. Turbolasers streaked between ships, shields flaring as metal groaned under the sheer weight of battle. But Cassandra did not charge blindly. Her forces wove through the engagement, shifting like a storm, creating openings where none should have existed. Every movement was calculated, each feint leading to an inevitable conclusion, trapping the Empire's fleet against the gravity well of Tyrus IX. Varix's jaw tightened as he realized his ships had nowhere to retreat. A transmission cut through the chaos. Cassandra's image filled his screen. Her expression was unreadable, her gaze the same cold steel that had torn through his forces for months. "You killed my husband," she said, her voice steady. "And now, I kill your empire." Varix sneered. "You think one battle wins a war?" "No," Cassandra said. "But this isn't a war. It's an execution." Her fleet struck with merciless precision. Varix's defenses collapsed. His officers shouted warnings, but there was no escape. One by one, the Empire's warships fell. Explosions bloomed against the black, turning titanic vessels into drifting wreckage. Cassandra did not savor the destruction. She did not celebrate. She simply pressed forward. There was one final blow to deliver. The superweapon, hidden within the Empire's core world, awaited activation. It had been the ultimate deterrent, a terror meant to keep humanity shackled. Cassandra now intended to turn it upon its makers. Her ground forces stormed the facility, tearing through the last remnants of Imperial resistance. She walked through the burning corridors, past the shattered remains of soldiers who had stood in her way, until she reached the control center. The Emperor himself awaited her. He was no god, no untouchable entity. He was a man, aged, calculating, and now for the first time afraid. Cassandra leveled her weapon at him. You built this weapon to keep us in line. Now it will erase you. The Emperor straightened, forcing his voice to remain calm. You think killing me will change anything? The galaxy will descend into chaos without order. She did not blink. Then let it burn. She fired. The Emperor fell. With a single command, she activated the weapon. But not upon a rebellious world. Not upon an enemy fleet. She turned it upon the Empire's capital. From orbit, the heavens ignited. The planet cracked, its surface consumed in light, centuries of oppression ending in a single, cataclysmic moment. The war was over. The Empire was dead. As the Resistance fleet withdrew, Cassandra stood at the viewport of her flagship. The void stretched before her, endless and uncertain. Darius approached cautiously. It's done. She exhaled. The vengeance she had sworn was fulfilled. But there was no satisfaction, only silence. What now? Darius asked. Cassandra's gaze remained fixed on the stars. Now, she said, we see what rises from the ashes.